Now we move on to the first panel discussion on sustainability and long-term business value, improving the top line. I would like to welcome our esteemed moderator and panelists for the session on the dais. Our moderator for the session, Ms. Nisha Poddar, Market Anchor and Editor M&A, CNBC TV 18. Our panel members, Mr. Ritesh Tiwari, President Bombay Chamber and CFO Hindustan Unilever and Unilever South Asia and Independent Director ONDC Board. Ms. Anjali Bansal, Founding Partner of Avaana Climate and Sustainability Fund. Mr. R. Mukundan, Managing Director and CEO of Tata Chemical Limited. I request all the panelists and moderator to the dais.
Thank you so much, everybody, for being here. It's an extremely important topic right now. And I also feel honored that I have a full house over here from some of the biggest companies and some people who really are investing in transitioning to better climate change. So we have to start now in terms of finding the solutions, and we have to also figure out where the solutions lie, and some of the big companies will have to really take that stride. And in fact, I must say that the companies represented here on the dais have already taken the lead in this tirade for sustainability. So let's see what lies ahead, and I hope that I can draw upon their experience and the solutions that lie, which also inspires many other companies to embark on this important journey. Welcome, everybody. And yes, let's begin with Mr. Mukundan. Now, I've known you for several years, and Tata is that blue-blooded conglomerate of India, has taken the lead in India in carbon emission reduction to go to net zero. Now, from the manufacturing side, how difficult or easy is this particular mission?
Thank you very much for Bombay Chamber for having me here, but I just wanted to highlight that we have set a target. We have some idea of where the pathway is and some idea which we don't know as yet. So we will discover the process as we go along. So let me just say where we are. We have clearly articulated under Project Alingana 3 broad targets. And this is a project running across all companies. It's not manufacturing alone. Service sectors will get faster. By 2045, we will be net zero. That's the commitment all companies are made, and they made it to their boards, and we are answerable to the board. Now, 2045 looks a little way off, and many of the CEOs sitting here may not be answerable to that. So what we have done is, in most companies, figured out a 2030 goal, and that's a specific goal. And I think each company has worked out where they can reach. For example, in Tata Chemicals, we have committed 30% carbon reduction from where we were in 2019. So that's the cutoff here, and from there we are measuring ourselves. We have followed a pathway of SBTi. Some companies have taken a relative goal. Some companies are actually looking at scope 3 minus scope 1 and 2. We have not mapped scope 3. We are going to bring that on stream very soon. So that's on the second two other aspects which are also part of this whole sustainability is circularity. But water is a very key part. We will all be net water positive, I think, in about 10 years' time. We are already net water positive in India, and I think our idea is to sort of push our overseas units. Our only unit which is not net water positive is UK, where we actually they are on a river, so they say they take water and put it back in you have to count it, but we don't want to count it that way, so that it's like an accounting issue. And lastly, biodiversity. Our focus has been on marine ecosystem. We think marine ecosystem is something we need to protect. So we have a flight path and a glide path available. The big challenge for India, of course, is when you talk about net zero. Just a minute on that. I think we don't have natural gas as a transition fuel. It's not going to be affordable by us. So really what has been highlighted by several speakers, I think we have to sort of go and develop our bioresources well, whether it be bamboo, biofuel, or let's say, looking at algae on the coastal ecosystem. I think these are the kind of directions we need to go. Some of them are very mature, doable today. For example, already in the boilers, we are blending about 3% biomass this year. Our target is to take it up to 10% by next 5 years and then take it up to, right up to 30%. I think that's the pathway we know is surely going to work. Of course, hybrid solar and wind is a very good option for most companies.
Yes.
And these will allow us to probably get to about 30-40% by 2030 anyway on the technologies which are available. Beyond that, of course, there are other gaps which will be elaborate later.
Very good point made there, because innovation is the nerve center of sustainability, because we have to find solutions for this transition as well. So Anjali, Bansal, this is the core to your funding for climate and sustainability. How is the landscape looking when we talk about reasonable, cheap solutions and innovations in India? Because some of the big companies can really take up the challenge of investing more for sustainability, but the larger crowd of companies really don't have that luxury.
Nisha, excellent question. And I think as Shri Sinha mentioned in the earlier session as well, India's path to net zero has to be both green and inclusive. While driving economic growth. So I think the challenge ahead of us is to find that fundamentally lower carbon growth pathway and continue growing at that 6 to 9% GDP growth over the next 25 years, which means in the immediate term, we will build a lot of infrastructure, both net and gross, new. About 75% of India's infrastructure that is in the plan for 2047 does not exist today. So that is the scale of build required. We will consume more. So steel, cement, power. 60% of our power is still coal-based. We are on a tremendous, I would say actually a very positive path on turning to green fuel, greener fuel, whether it is renewable, so it's wind, solar, hydro, hydrogen, etc., but also biofuels. At the same time, we have to find solutions that are frugal, that are low cost. It is amply clear to us, and I'll speak a little bit about what we do at Avaana, that as we think about the climate mitigation, adaptation, resilience, the COP framework, a lot of the mitigation-related solutioning is being done in the global north, which is far more carbon-focused, whereas the here and now for us in India and the global south is our everyday roti kapda makan. It's the problem of bola mato, the problem of 50 degrees Celsius, life and livelihood at that temperature as summers get hotter, winters get colder as well. So I think those are the things we have to solve for. The good news now, and there is a lot of good news, is we are seeing this upsurge, an upswell of technology-led innovation. So India is very young. We are the fastest growing large economy. We are the third largest innovation startup ecosystem. And it is wonderful to see a lot of energy in that entrepreneurial ecosystem now turn itself to solving for climate. So we see founders, and at Avaana we are looking at across the emission scorecard, so at energy transition, resources including water, air, circular economy, supply chains, and climate resilient food systems, we see about 200 opportunities every quarter. So think about 800 to 1,000 opportunities, founders every year who have said, I will not try and build the next consumer tech, fintech unicorn. I actually want to build a climate unicorn. Right. So if we can solve for 1.4 billion people at our very cost-sensitive, price-sensitive levels, gosh, we can solve for the global south from India. So in India, we will build for India and the global south and even for the world.
And that's a great headline you've given me, that it's not going to be digital-led innovations, but climate-led innovations that we are moving towards emphatically. Great point. Ritesh, Tiwari, adding you to the conversation. Now, of course, HUL has taken the lead, and of course, it's a household name with many of its products. And you can make a much deeper impact of the sustainability thrust in our households. How is that particular agenda really panning out? Help us understand that, and then we can get into the business aspects.
No, one of the things I was mentioning at the beginning of the conversation today, for us, we are very clear that superior business performance is absolutely same as being a business which is sustainable. And our mission is to make sustainable living commonplace. That's how we start our thinking. We have our goals, 33 goals we have. Some of them are short term, which is next 2 to 5 years. Some of them medium term, 5 to 15 years, and some of them are genuinely long term. To the point Anjali was making earlier, that we need to crack innovation at scale to ensure that this gets impacted. And there are multi-stakeholders. We know there are consumers today who are choosing a product because it is more sustainable. So it's also good for the business. Equally, when you end up cracking a proper technology, you can get the same job done, not only sustainably, but also the lower cost, which again is a huge need. With disposable incomes get challenged in the country, and then you need to find solutions which are equally cost effective apart from being right for the environment. So I always keep saying you have to do things right and do right things at the same time. Now coming to hard goals that we have as an organization. So by 2039, we have committed net zero from our suppliers till our point of sale. And in our business, the bigger impact comes from the entire supply chain from which we end up sourcing our products. To give an example, we have a 20,000 crore business of home care, which is part of the 60,000 crore Hindustan Unilever. Today we use, of course, LAB, which is coming from carbon source of crude oil. Our agenda is to ensure by 2030, we replace every carbon as part of this business with a renewable carbon or recycled carbon. For example, we get now capturing soda ash through energy which is emitted. Those fumes is what we're converting into grey soda ash and then recycling it back into the product. That's one example. But to me, ESG is all three important elements. Social is equally important, and so is governance. Today, we have almost 200,000 Shakti Ammas who work as part of the network. These are all women entrepreneurs who are in different parts of the country, in rural areas. We provide them thinking, we provide them training, we provide them livelihood. And today, they do amazing job in terms of getting the second income in the household, which is very much required. And in the process, as we run the business, they ensure that our products reach to the deepest part of the country. So again, it's a win-win situation that is very much important to be placed as part of that. Equally, importance of developing skill in the country. I think we as India need that. So we are committed to ensure that 1.5 million youth are today getting all the amount of training and resourcing so that they are available in the job market and then bring more resources as part of human capital in the country. Ultimately, financial capital and human capital will have to come together for us to really do the job, as Mr. Sinha called out, the new green frontier.
Right, thanks for that. Of course, many takeaways from the initiatives being taken by your company. Mukundan, give us a sense on how to maintain that balance between your margins, top line, and going ahead with the sustainability investments.
So fundamentally, I think this thing about balance, we got to start to say that they are not at conflict with each other. If our mindset starts to work that things are at conflict, I think then we'll end up with say, I need to maintain balance. But actually one feeds on the other. So while there could be a gap today in terms of what you want to start with, I think the gap gets very, very quickly filled as you look for options and alternatives. So when we started looking at substituting, let's say, simple thing like coal with biofuel, we actually didn't have enough biomass nearby. Transporting biomass was a big issue. Then we looked around and the villagers came forward and said, listen, I think why are you getting all this coal from Indonesia? We can grow the biomass, you'll save so much on transport. We have done the math. It is actually beneficial. So you need to then engage with the community, then you've got to get them the right kind of, let's say, bamboo. And there are scores of research work which has been done on bamboo, which has got high biomass content, high calorific content, and then you start to work with the village. So firstly, then it sort of allows you to reduce carbon. It gives the money into the hands of the people who are nearby your factories and builds an ecosystem which is green. So it is finding that pathway. So when you start, actually, we were even equally puzzled because if you look at our US operation, they are going to switch to natural gas, finally go to SMR. In India, whether SMR will come, we don't know because it's a technology which I think we may not get civil liabilities removed for us to move nuclear. Kenya, we have the benefit of 97% of the grid is already renewable because they are using geothermal. So you can get spots in the world where they are gifted and they can move very quickly. But the spot where India is, I think we've got an issue which we need to solve, especially on the energy ecosystem. While we have good amount of sunshine, good amount of wind, beyond that, I think, for example, the grid gets unstable. I'm getting a bit technical here. After 35% of blend of hybrid power in it. So then how do you maintain grid stability? Bit more of technology, digital can help it raise it to something like 40%. After that, it is really needing solutions which are going to be addressed through the pathways which we discover. And many of the pathways are not working at cross purposes, they are actually enabling each other.
Yes. So very innovative solutions, but I want to ask one question. What will drive any small business? Do you think that SMEs will find it difficult to embark on this? What will motivate them to find different solutions and go on path of sustainability?
So, very good question. I think this is a problem which I think most of the association like Bombay Chamber need to deal with. I think it's not the, we can make commitment, we can start making the change, but as Ritesh said, if I have to work on my scope 1 and scope 2, and he has to work on scope 1 and scope 2, it's got to be in partnership with the entire supply chain. And you add scope 3 on top of that, logistics, warehouse, the entire chain has to be thought through. And really, I think the task of the large companies is to take their supply chain as partners along with them. So in my model, for example, it starts with the consumer and customer. Yes. You have to make them transition, and there are very good models already done. Right. If you look at what has happened to our lights today, 100% LED. When you look at our air conditioners, your refrigeration, or any electrical appliances, you got the rating system, and the rating system is getting tougher, by the way. The standards which were there in 1990, in 2000, 2010, what we are now going to enter is even tougher energy efficiency standard. Right. So the regulatory bodies are tightening it. You start with the customer, and then start putting the pressure on yourself, and then extend it to your supply chain, and then work with them. And this is a process, and I don't think there's a way that we can just say that, I announce and I get it done. It's a collaborative process. You got to engage, you got to work, and we are very happy that we are working in an ecosystem where people are more or less convinced. Right. The fact is that small companies need help. They need help with capital, they need help with technology, and it is the task of our teams to sort of engage with them and work on that.
Right, well said. And taking off from that particular point, of course, when there is so much innovation happening, and if the entrepreneurs want to really create this as a big business opportunity, Anjali, Bansal, how is that going to create an ecosystem? Are you already seeing that happening at a small scale as well?
Absolutely. I think we are fortunate in India where we have the convergence of three very powerful forces. I think capital has become more and more responsible and is calling for, sure, ESG, but certainly on the E side where there are better metrics available. So there's the confluence of capital. Technology, we are not always dependent elsewhere for technology. We are able to create our own, much like we have created our own UPI and ONDC, which Ritesh and I are working on. Similarly, we will leapfrog. We will find our own solutions for grid scale transition, for different kinds of fuels, for actually effluent processes. And I'll speak about a few of them. The third thing that is happening is market readiness. Solar is a great example. 15 years ago, the first cycle of solar didn't work globally. Why? Because it was dependent on subsidies, the technology was too expensive, and the market really did not have an impetus to shift. Today, round the clock, hybrid is not just a possibility, but a reality. Now we need to scale it. It is better than acceptable because actually a new unit of solar is cheaper than a new unit of thermal. I sit on the board of Tata Power and I see the transition happening when we say no new coal, massive improvement in stock price, and of course strategy has to follow through. Right. So large companies and MSMEs are seeing the benefit of transitioning their business models to green. What is required? We need solutions. Those solutions, I don't think people are not adopting take plastics, circular economy. They're not adopting because those solutions don't exist today. So while there is a fair amount of large capital, commercial capital flowing into market scale opportunities, renewable power is an example, there is not enough capital flowing into the innovation system because these models are not yet proven. 10 years ago, nobody wanted to invest in Indian SaaS. They said, nobody can build SaaS out of India. Today, it's a given. There's a playbook. Yes. 20 years ago, nobody thought there would be an internet economy. Today, there is. In fact, we lead the world on internet economy. We have to create those proof points where more innovation capital and bring in that blended finance innovation capital so that we are creating those solutions across everything. Energy, grid storage, and we are seeing some phenomenal companies doing this.
Investor community has a lot to do in this, creating this ecosystem, because we have also seen the premiumization of equity for the companies who have taken that leapfrog. But it has to really penetrate to the smaller companies as well. Ritesh, how will the ecosystem develop? You have a large vendor partnership, and sustainability is all about creating that whole ecosystem of sustainability. Every value chain, unit has to be compliant with that. How easy or difficult is it? And give us a sense on how that has been done by your company.
There are two paths one can get the entire scope 1 and scope 2 done before we address scope 3 energy, where of course is a different ballgame altogether. You can choose a set of suppliers which are large, work with them, get technology sorted together, and then get your business done. But again, I go back to the S of the ESG. You also got to do that responsibly in an inclusive manner, which means we should not shy away from MSMEs. We have to take them as well and create capability in the entire value chain. So big suppliers, big partners, small partners, we have to take all of them together. For doing that, one of the points I was making earlier, partnership is a force multiplier. We will have to forge multiple partnership. Many business models Anjali spoke about, as Avaana is one of the evangelists in the process, and we need those innovators to come with innovation, and we can then deploy them at scale. When we started to address the challenge of carbon, as I mentioned to you in the home care business, we are not thinking of trying to solve that on our own. We called for a summit, called partners together to brainstorm together what is the next vector of technology that we have to crack so that we are able to generate those amount of innovation and then start replacing carbon with renewable energy sources. And equally, training, imparting technology, to some extent funding. You have to do all that and more while remaining competitive. Because what you don't want to do is to do things which are not going to be sustainable. You have to ensure that you do things and also make it sustainable. To Anjali's point, today, every next gigawatt of green energy comes at a cost which is lower than the current non-renewable energy. That's the business case. When that happens, you operate at the same spot, the point I was mentioning earlier. So yeah, it's a pretty lot of hard work. It will involve training, will involve partnering, will involve support, will also require funding to be done in the value chain, but more importantly, everybody together in an inclusive manner, large companies and small companies put together. We do support our value chain partners in terms of there are areas which we have innovated, so we ensure that we come together as an organization to do it. The recent contract that we agreed in the area of solar energy, it's not only for the needs of factories of Hindustan Unilever, but that energy source, which is green solar, will also be the source of energy for our partners who are dedicated and make supplies to us. So we are trying to solve the scope 3 green energy not only for us, but also for our partners. So there are places I believe that we need to lead in as a large organization, but equally there are places we need to learn in. There are innovation will not necessarily happen in only large organizations. It can happen in the smallest part of the country. Our ability to ensure that we are receptive and we are using those ideas, bring them up and scale it. I'm a firm believer of this concept called, you have to experiment and fail fast. But equally, you have to experiment and scale up fast. If you think you have cracked something which has importance for the business and for the society at large.
All right, so scale up fast, and you talked about creating that ecosystem. Even, once this is a widespread phenomena and well accepted, then even the policy of excluding those who are not compliant could be one of the ways, and we have seen that, examples of that globally as well. From the Tata side, I asked this question about balancing the business, but I want to understand the low-cost innovation and on the other hand, also creating, your vendor partners and smaller companies in order to come up with ideas to solve for it. Give us a little more sense on how Tata can make a difference in this, because Tatas have all the wherewithal, but the ecosystem is not yet developed. So how is Tata really navigating that particular path? And on the other hand, you're a global company. Your competitive edge when it comes to competing with other global companies, because Mr. Mukundan, we know that some of the European companies have already adopted a lot of solutions which are not easily available for India, and investments are huge. So for them, the ecosystem is already developed. For us, we need a lot more going. So you want to talk about that, how to create that competitive edge when we have to balance this and create our own ecosystem back home as well.
Yeah, so let me start by saying that I think it's an illusion that stuff is not happening here and stuff is happening in Europe. So I just want to say that the first thing is that knowledge which is produced in any part of the world is filtering extremely fast now. I think the knowledge democratization, knowledge dissipation and absorption is actually very, very rapid. It doesn't remain
Cost
isolated.
competitive.
Including cost company. I'm coming to that. I think no customer, I cannot go to my customer. I'm in a B2B business. So I cannot go to another business and tell them that, pay me a premium. At best, they'll pay a premium for a little bit of time, but after that, they will say, match it with whatever it is. So I think our approach to business is that you have to be competitive with the lowest cost available option today, and there's no option, but we have to get there. To start off, it may be a little bit, because, see, one of the problems when you make a switch from conventional business to the new green business is that the new green business volume is going to be smaller, the conventional business volume is going to be higher. The scale itself is one big element of reducing cost.
Yes.
So I completely agree that we need to scale fast to get it more competitive, but I think there is a bridging gap. I think the bridging gap is what we have to bring capital there, which we are willing to do. The second big piece about the innovation amongst the smaller companies, smaller vendors, I think the promoters, the owners get it the moment it is a cost reduction for them.
Yes.
You cannot go with a plan which is going to be cost increase. If you go with a cost reduction, if their life becomes simpler, they are more likely to adopt that. And I think that's the way we've seen in most of the cases. So you've got to help them, you've got to engage with them. Also, it's a misnomer that small businesses, small business owners don't get ideas. When you talk about bamboo as a feed into our boiler, the idea didn't come from us. It came from one of our contractors. He had grown in his farm the special type of bamboo, and he said, listen, come and see, there's a mass, the biomass is so much. Can we do something together? Actually, our team went there, and they got it tested in the lab. And of course, we have a scientific view of that whole bamboo called Bima bamboo. That's what it's called there. And then we had to work on a plan. So ideas come from anywhere. So I think firstly, they need to know the priorities. The first case in all this is to communicate very clearly what are you going to, what is your plan, where do you want to go. Second is to make them partners in the progress, to say that we'll work together.
Yes.
And I don't think we believe that we have all the answers. We do believe that we have to learn and we have to go. So, for example, we've got a lot of partnerships with universities today in terms of the new technologies, what we need to look for, in terms of replacing, let's say, the petroleum products, in terms of lubricants. So many items need to be...
But still a long-term plan. It is not something that can happen immediately.
It is
so
not,
a lot of patience is required.
A lot of patience, a lot of working with them.
What I was trying to segue into also very subtly is that how can government measures really help? Does our industry really need the government support emphatically in this transition? And what is government doing and what is industry putting forth?
Yeah, so I think there are three kinds of government support. One is industry-led movement, which government then backs it up with support, which is not a regulatory support. So that's the best way to deal with this, so that industry goes forward with its own plan. And there are wonderful case studies of CREP being an approach which industry has voluntarily gone ahead. If you look at our caustic industry in India, I think it's the only industry which has eliminated mercury cells completely. Mercury cells exist in Japan, they exist in US. This was an industry-led process where entire industry went and said, listen, I think we need to get out of, but we need some concessions on capital good imports. And government did give it, and I think we kept to the plan. This happened in 1990s, much ahead of the curve. So there are industry movements which I can give you examples from the chemical industry where industry has taken the step and has gone ahead and executed together. And fundamentally the way it happened is the larger of the chlor-caustic companies took the burden on themselves initially. The smallest units were the last ones to change. When we gave the commitment to the government, how the change will happen. The second one is what consumer or customer or supplier-led push, which means it's coming from the ecosystem in your value chain. They are changing and then you're forced to change and there is no choice. So if today my customers are moving to, let us say, zero carbon by 2035, even though I may have set a goal for 2045, I have to change my plan. I have to abandon my 2045 plan because without my customers, I don't exist. So that's again a not government push, but coming straight from, and the companies to whom I supply are under pressure from their consumers. So I think that pushes a second one. The third one is a regulatory one, which I think is the last of the best option available for all of us, where we work together as an industry. And there are wonderful cases today. For example, the EPR program which India has launched on plastic is something which we don't appreciate well. But I think it's something which we need to sort of push ahead and get it done. And sort of similarly in the electronic waste, we need to move ahead. So in the area of waste management, again, I think it is about building that ecosystem, industry coming together. And really the success story for this is, somebody asked me why Gujarat has got chemical industry, no other state.
Right.
Really the government has invested in common effluent and wastewater processing plant for the entire industry there. So sometimes government has to step in with the capital, and that we must engage with government, and they have the wherewithal to do it.
All right, so I would just add 2 points that, you know, the EV, one of the automotive companies told me that we have an EV line set up, but it's expensive and the infrastructure is not yet set. And there are very few customers who are going to be takers, right? And on the other hand, a large steel company shared that the European businesses are becoming more low cost because they can comply with these standards, global standards for climate change much faster and more effectively than us. So their low cost advantage is going. So, you know, I think from the business point of view, and most of the money and awareness is going to really come from the big businesses. These 2 aspects of low cost and financing the transition has to be addressed emphatically, immediately, and there can be government measures and there can be financing. So, Anjali, Bansal, how is the investor community helping this transition and funding?
So in many ways, just on the back of COP last week, where some pledges were made and not enough perhaps, the financing community is actually coming together. So the confluence again, as I said earlier, of capital, industry, and I didn't mention government or policy, but we probably have one of the better policy regimes globally. So there is a awareness, so Mukundan mentioned EPR, there are now PLI schemes for both solar, there's battery schemes coming through. FAME is really what propelled the growth of the EV ecosystem. We are starting to see the emergence of standards for interoperability in charging that will unlock and unblock some of the, you know, the adoption of EVs, if you will. So a lot is happening. Blended finance is required across the capital stack. We need the large commercial capital for utility scale renewable power projects, for example. But we also need the innovation capital for early stage, for technology, for something that is not yet perhaps market ready but needs that support, and the concessionary capital, both equity and debt, to promote the adoption in segments. Take MSMEs, for example, where it's like the old-fashioned viability gap funding. So people who are here who have seen the old project finance, this is the classic viability gap funding.
Right.
So I think we need to get creative around capital, bring it all together, and promote innovation.
Right.
So I'm going to use this opportunity to actually share with the chamber, and we've already shared it with the chamber. We are actually launching a very large grant challenge program for startups in climate tech innovation across multiple streams: energy transition, circular economy, climate resilient agriculture, climate data, carbon, and mobility and industrial decarbonization, and this is being done in conjunction with government. So Startup India, Niti Aayog, Atal Innovation Mission, Avaana, a number of industry partners, including companies from the Tata Group, SIDBI, GAP, RMI, CEW, so a lot of the research folks, and of course Bombay Chamber. So wanted to share that here first.
Great initiative there. But one point is that the private equity also needs to give that comfort to the companies that, all right, if you are okay with the returns can be a little down because you're investing in the transition. This question I asked and I didn't get an answer. And hopefully this will be answered in due course of time.
I can answer,
right?
I can answer. See, private equity depends on the nature of capital. Who are the LPs? And you know this, Nisha, really well. The nature of you know, if Brookfield is announcing a $20 billion transition fund,
Right.
they will not write small checks. Beyond Net Zero, General Atlantic has a 7 billion, TPG has a 10 billion. So with large capital, and of course the DFI, MDB universe has to write checks in millions of dollars, if not tens of millions and hundreds of millions of dollars. So that consequently will need to go into very, very large scale, potentially brownfield projects.
Right.
But we do need, and that will generate commercial returns.
All right, so there's hope there. But Ritesh, Tiwari, you want to add to this. Government efforts and government subsidization of transition. As an association, what are the steps being taken and where are we in that roadmap?
No, I think you can do a kickstart through incentives, but that is not the way, in my mind, you can run for years to deliver the end business model. Ultimately, let me say as a CFO, one of my key jobs is to ensure that I make a winning business case for sustainability in the organization. We will have to ensure that this entire progress, investment growth is driven by business. Of course, government through policies, through interventions. Today, the only reason why solar has become possible for us to do, you produce electricity solar in one state, you want to consume in multiple states, you have to wheel the energy, and hence you have to then ensure that the network gives you enough amount of, let me say, incentive to get their job done. Government has leaned in with the captive power unit generation idea in that space. So there are places we do require government from a policy and from a support perspective, but in my mind, it will only be a Kickstarter. Business will have to take over and do this multiple year. And we also know, Nisha, that these investments required are not going to be 1, 2, 4 year investment. Once we make a commitment for anything, it will have to be a multi-year investment. So even a simple job of doing a performance management, no longer can we do a quarter or a yearly performance management because you're committing for years to come a large goal which you have milestones but will require investment for years to come. So how do you performance manage your P&L into multiple year? That becomes a very clear bottom line for us to get the job done.
Right. What about things like carbon credit, which can help companies mitigate this issue?
Of course, I can imagine that as we start getting the net zero done, India wants to get net zero done by 2070. As Hindustan, Unilever, we want to get it done by 2039. Different businesses will have a different capability and a different starting point to get the job done. One will end up bridging in short term the commitment with carbon credits if you have not generated enough innovation. So in my mind, that will, I see that more as a gap bridging measure of carbon credit rather than that's a route and mechanism to get the job done. Right. So it should be more of a gap bridging measure in my mind. But you have to work on innovation and change your business model in the first place.
Right. Question to you on the measures. Do you think that there are any global measures or business models that can be brought in for this transition to happen, and any specific measures that you would like to talk about? Or the support from the government?
Yes, certainly. I think, see, firstly, the point about in the long run, business case must hold itself together. And fundamentally, the customers should not be paying more. Otherwise, this is a recipe for not starting at some point diminishing returns in any case. So I think that's a given. Having given that, I think there will be period of the initial start, there will be need for support. And I think whether we talk about increased taxation on coal, which India has started to impose, that's an indirect credit coming for renewable resources, or tax incentives. And these are all measures which government can do. PLI scheme is another one. So I fundamentally, I think one of the things we need to get off the ground is measurement.
Yes.
I think we need accurate measurement here, and I think in terms of, I would say that everybody is reporting the same standard, everybody's standards are measurable, and then you start trading in the carbon space. I think it's fundamentally the right approach to do. But I agree completely with Ritesh that it's going to be a temporary measure, and I think this green credit, which is expanding the entire horizon of carbon, beyond carbon, and saying it's a green credit is a great move. Also, it involves people.
Yes.
And once people become sensitive, I think the whole element of change starts to happen.
Right.
I can just say that not just for financial returns, if I need to recruit talent tomorrow, the talent is asking questions, the younger talent is asking questions, a very fundamental question.
Yes.
So we used to have this water bottles, and I can see that they are glass bottles here, but then, in plastic one. And one day, a young recruit walked into Buffet and she said, listen, you just signed up some sustainability sign out there. Why is a plastic bottle on your table? We got rid of it.
Yes.
We got rid of completely. It's now it's no longer bottles. It's like you fill
Many
it.
offices did.
Many offices have done.
Yes.
So these seem symbolic today, but they change the habit.
Yes.
You become more sensitive to what you're doing, and I think it's important to have that dialogue. So really the push is going to come from customers, the push is going to come from employees, and I think it's an entire ecosystem. People are more sensitive. Finally, on the funding point which you mentioned, I think firstly it's going to start with companies which will not be worth investing for the fund manager because there's a negative list. The moment there's a negative list, you don't want to be ending up in the negative list. Yes. And that sort of moves you away from that. Then, of course, the P multiples and other things come in. But I think at some point, the negative list will kick in because that's the easiest one for the fund managers to implement. Just imagine the biggest mutual fund in India says that, listen, I think my cutoff is 30%. Anything more than that, I won't put my money there. That's it. Immediately the market will re-rate those companies and everybody will start to move to that 30%.
Yes.
Whether it's SEBI mandated or whether it's mandated by somebody. And when you make a move like that, I seriously believe scale will come.
Yes.
I seriously believe the costs will come down and the entire ecosystem will get set up.
So that consciousness has come, but the SEBI mandate, is that enough? And are the rating systems, are they effective in your view so far?
So I think firstly, the ISSB board has come out with fundamentally the first set of, up till now, this sustainability piece was being run by Chief Sustainability Officer. There was a separate strategy officer and a separate CFO office. One of the first things which has happened with the changes recently is that everything is collapsed into one. Now, the sustainability reporting is more or less happening through the CFO because at the end of the day, someone has to audit those numbers, someone has to report, and it has now become an increased responsibility. Ritesh, I'm sure you're going to agree with that. I think that's where everybody's headed. Same way, if you look at strategy and sustainability now are no longer two separate functions. They've been collapsed into one in many companies.
Right.
The reason is you can't have 5-year view of the future or 10-year view of the future which does not incorporate sustainability into it. In fact, I was speaking to Anirban just now. He was saying in the faculty teaching, he does not want separate sustainability program. He wants to embed sustainability into every program and course they are teaching in the university. That's a right way to approach this because this has to be inside, not as another separate unit outside.
I agree with you, and that has created a lot of awareness, but I've also seen a lot of CEOs, before they start talking about the business, they start talking about the ESG standards, the climate consciousness, net zero target, and sustainability. Ritesh, a very tough question for you to be taking on behalf of corporate India, but how much of it is lip service and greenwashing?
Yeah. So let me just finish first the BSR conversation and come to that. Today, as India, BRSR, in my view, taken a fabulous step forward. 800 odd measures, if I add core BRSR, 822 measures. 1,000 listed companies will end up disclosing them, getting them reviewed, and reasonable assurance for a core measure out of that. And the core measure, by and large, hits the chord, which you mentioned, Nisha, which is net zero, and hence the entire, and net zero, including energy transition. So that will elevate the amount of data availability. Today, now that BSR has started reporting, you can sit and analyze where you are in your business model in conjunction to your industry and across pan-industry. The amount of learning that this data and insight is going to bring will also be, in my view, one of the multiplier in our journey to go forward. And India's really cracked it, in my mind, very well. Of course, we took GRI as a standard, and we got BRSR done. And we're learning to course correct it. And SEBI is extremely open about it in terms of taking views from the industry to ensure that we're able to get it executed. And with a very clear philosophy that we want to ensure that the credibility of India Inc.'s balance sheet is not compromised. That's at the heart of that, that's the very clear primacy. And now coming back to your question about how real are these measures? And I think this will have to start, with a clear commitment given publicly. Once you give those commitment and then your ability through BRSR and other reports and other communication which you do, share progress openly with the community. To me, once that happens, this ecosystem will start thriving on its own. Yes, there are rating agencies and there are different parameters and different ways each of them end up judging the ESG outcome, but I'm saying B, it is what it is. But the fact is, each of them are pretty comprehensive on E and S and G put together. Yes. I don't think so you can get away in today's time of evangelism in the country, in the world, by greenwashing. I'm saying the proof will be in the pudding, and you have to show those tangible measures. Look at scope 3. There is no way you can get out unless you are able to change the energy source from getting from grid to a solar or to a thermal or to a hydro going forward, or for that matter, wind energy. Those are hard conversions. They are going to get audited and get published. So I think the mechanism of reporting, making it transparent, mechanism of giving reasonable assurance for a core set of measure, including value chain reporting, which is one of the key element, as you know, of the core BRSR, that will start to show in clear black and white as to where we are as a country, as India Inc. So I'm very optimistic. I think we are taking the right steps. We just have to be a little patient in that area. It will take some time for this wheel to turn. But once it turns, in my will keep churning great green outcomes.
Great thoughts on that, and of course that has to
just
evolve.
wanted to add to that piece, which is there very simply, one of the fundamental tenets of improving, and I'm not saying wherever you are, whatever that number is, if you want to improve, it's disclosure, transparency, and other side, getting feedback.
Yes.
I think the moment you put the data out there, I think there will be some criticism which will come, but as an industry, we are very clear that we are open to criticism, open to feedback. We will go back and work on it.
Right.
Nobody here claims to be perfect. Nobody here is claiming to know all the answers. And if there are issues to be fixed, I think one of the commitments we need to make openly in this dialogue, because it's not a dialogue just with your customers, it's a dialogue with the entire ecosystem. I think it's a dialogue in which we have to say that, listen, we'll learn as we go, and the solutions will be found, and more transparent we are. And I think India is making the data more transparent, at least for the top companies. As I said, I think it's a journey. And wonderfully that if there is criticism, feedback, the industry will take it and we'll move forward.
One technical question, the criticism that I get is that the SEBI required compliance for ESG, that is not yet apple to apple comparable, and it has to still evolve. What's your take on that?
So it's a bit like any accounting standard. If you look at accounting standards, people will tell you how it has evolved over a period of time. I think the first set of version is out there. This is the second version. First version was out before. And I think we'll keep improving. The basic thing is that every once or 1 or 2 years, go back to the drawing board, check what needs to be improved, improve it. And including the international reporting also is evolving. So
Right.
the good news is that rather than just report on financial outcomes, companies are now going to report holistically in an integrated manner on the holistic outcome. And that's how you judge a company. And I think it's a good start. We should progress it. And we will learn as we go along, and there'll be improvements which will come.
Right. Anjali, Bansal, I want to understand one aspect. How are you seeing this transition and the motivation? Is it also considered a luxury at times if the overall business environment gets tough?
So I think that phase, fortunately, is over. That phase where it felt that green is meant for premium and green is meant for luxury. Now, today, green is a requirement. So, when I started in business, I'll give a different example. 30 years ago, there was no digital. Technology was not very well understood. It used to sit in, there was no CTOs. There was IT department.
Yes.
Today, digitalization is embedded across the enterprise.
Yes.
There is no enterprise function that is not digitalized. Every element of how we live, work, and interact is digitalized.
Right.
Same thing is happening to sustainability. In fact, it is bigger and faster. Right. This is the biggest transformation and transition the world has to go through, and super fast. So
Right.
it's no longer a luxury, whether it is economic times are good or bad. The new technologies that are emerging are emerging to solve things at scale and at lower cost.
Right.
If adoption hasn't happened, it's because the right solution hasn't emerged, not because they don't want to adopt.
So it's well embedded thought and process now. And what do you think about the COP summit, about the fossil fuel in terms of a step down in the way it's going to work towards it? There's politics involved in climate consciousness. There is money involved. Are you seeing that balancing act being done by the countries and by global associations?
So the political economy of climate, if you will, is also a reality. I think it's easier to innovate solutions and automate BRSR measurement, which I know all of us break our heads on, 822 metrics all being measured. So, by the way, innovation happening there. We are seeing companies that are actually creating automated tools and building an ML AI layer on top to actually make it useful for business decision making, not just backward-looking measurement, but forward-looking decisioning. So I wish the political economy of climate was as easy.
That's
It's
right.
not.
So it's a
So it
step
is
down
balancing.
to transitioning away from phasing out. And but at least fossil fuel make a mention in the summit.
At least
so
it
that's a very, very
There's a
good
loss
point.
and damage fund, at least.
Yes. So there are many good things that are happening, but the whole ecosystem has to develop and a lot of patient work that needs to be done. Any final thoughts you want to give, Ritesh Tiwari?
I think I'll start with, I'll end with what I started. I think we have to look that you cannot imagine going forward that business and sustainability has to operate at a sweet spot. It will have to be the same spot. That's a thought I just want to leave behind.
Right, and we mostly spoke about climate or the E part of ESG, but the other two parts also, and at least diversity has been intact on our panel. At least we'll appreciate that. I really enjoyed, and a lot of takeaways coming in from all the three participants. Thank you so much for so many insights, and thank you for such a patient audience. Thank you so much.
Can I also thank Nisha Poddar, and thank you really, Nisha, for accepting my invitation to come and
No, my
run this
pleasure.
session. Nisha is one of the earliest innovators, senior media people who saw the potential in sustainability. And I've seen you reporting on this, commenting on this, and almost sort of you have also hung your hat on this a little bit. So thank you for doing that.
Thank you so much. My pleasure.
And the green jacket was thoughtful with the green conversation today.
Thank you, all the panel members, for thought-provoking deliberations and panel discussion. I request Mr. Sandeep Khosla, Director General, Bombay Chamber, to present a memento to our panelist and moderator as a token of appreciation. I would also like to thank our partner HUL, HSBC, PwC, and ETDC for their support. Anjali Bansal. To Mr. Ritesh Tiwari. Mr. Mukundan. I request all the panelists to join for a group photograph.